Tennessee This Week from WATE's 6 on Your Side starts now.
You and your neighbors cast the ballots in the county general, state, and federal primaries. The votes were counted and the winners are in. We are recapping the results and hearing from the candidates who came out on top, a post-election edition of Tennessee This Week. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Tennessee This Week. I'm Kristen Farley. Election day coming on a Thursday, meaning we are still processing really the aftermath of the vote. One of the hottest races in our area, the Republican primary, aiming for a shot at the congressional seat that Jimmy Duncan has held now for decades. The long and hard-fought campaign saw Tim Burchett winning the Republican nomination for U.S. House District 2. Burchett taking 48% of the vote to 36% for Jimmy Matlock, a wide margin in a field that grew to 7 candidates. On the day after, I had a chance to sit down with Knox County Mayor Tim Burchett. All right, Mayor, congratulations.
Thank you.
How did it feel last night as the numbers started coming in and it was clear that this was going to be a victory for you?
Well, everybody was more confident than I was, of course. I mean, I always two ways to run, scared and unopposed, and I had opposition, obviously. I had, if you count the News Sentinel, I had 7 people running against me. So, it was a crowded field, so I wanted to know, I didn't want that Truman moment where, you know, he's holding up the paper and says, Dewey beats Truman. I didn't want somebody holding up that paper, so I was guarded.
That definitely didn't happen last night. Let's talk about the negativity, though, from the race. You
Sure.
just kind of alluded to it. Did that leave you with any sort of resentment?
No, not really. I've been in this for so long, and it hurt me for my wife and daughter. You know, my wife is a widow, and I adopted Isabel. Isabel's our little girl. Her daddy's in heaven. But I saw my wife said one time to me, you know, I've never hurt like this since we lost Eddie. And Eddie, of course, was her husband, Isabel's biological father. Mm-hmm. And that angered me, and that was uncalled for, a lot of the things that went on, and a lot of the people that were involved and frankly are still involved are trying to disrupt things. But you know, I talk about my faith. It's not printed on my things. I said at my mama's funeral, she's not a bumper sticker kind of Christian, and I want to be that kind of Christian. And I have to have forgiveness, because if I don't, I become everything that I dislike about those other folks. I know that maybe sound a little odd to some of our viewers. It probably doesn't sound odd to you, but it is true. And well, I do that. And you know, people have never run up. They get these consultants that come in. My consultants, some of them are former consultants, because they said, you need to go negative, Tim. Mm-hmm. If I'd have gone negative, it would have not have even been anywhere near as close.
That's what I was going to ask you. How difficult was it at times, especially if there were people saying you need to go negative? You know, we talked to political pundits who said that negative works, but the results last night didn't really echo that.
Well, they would have worked for us, because the things that we had were very strong and were very factual and very hard hitting, and people would understand it. I go back to my family and faith and things like that, and I decided not to do it. That's really not my style. And I said something to my little girl, Isabel, she's 11, and I said, baby, you think we ought to go negative? And she said, Dad, I said, what's negative? And I explained it to her, and she said, Dad, he said, you need to be the man that people believe you are. And I thought to myself, wow.
That's pretty deep for an 11-year-old.
She's a very deep little girl. She is very in touch with her maker, and her mama has done an excellent job raising her.
Real quickly, before we get to some of the big issues, let's talk about, what did you take away from all this? What did you learn from this experience?
Just to trust my gut, and I do that. And you know, the people that work around me that know me in my office, in the mayor's office, they'll say, what does your gut say, boss? Because it's a lot of times not what the pros say. And so, in my gut, you know, it goes back to my belief in my Creator, and it's a personal thing with me, but it goes back to that. He has given me, I'm obviously not the best looking person, and and I'm not the smartest. It took me 6 years to get through college, and I didn't drink or smoke pot. And it took me, and my dad was dean of student conduct. I say that, I'm not kidding. It took me 6 years to get through college, and I ended up with a degree in technological and adult education. I'm very proud of that. But you know, I don't have those things that a lot of people do, but I have a sense about things and people, and sometimes it's almost spooky. we don't need to get into all that. That's
No,
that's fine.
we definitely could, and I think that trust your gut is something that a lot of people who know you would say that you've kind of lived by throughout your political career.
Yes, ma'am.
Let's talk about some of the issues, because there's going to be some pretty heavy-hitting things happening up in Washington, obviously. Let's start with immigration.
Sure.
And the situation that just happened here in East Tennessee, at that meatpacking plant up
Yeah.
in Morristown. As to date, the owners, operators still have not been charged with anything at this point.
That's correct.
How do you feel like that situation should be handled?
Well, first of all, we got to demagnetize our country and our state. When I first took office as the county mayor, in indigent care, we had in the budget $5 million. Indigent care for the Knox County. You multiply that across the state of Tennessee and the country, and that's a large amount of money. And that's a failure on our federal government. And what's going on now, separating these families, that is wrong. We can do better than that. As a nation, we should do better than that. And that's been going on, and they're playing politics with these folks because it has been going on a long time. We've got to deal with the issue of human trafficking, and it's and it all fits in together. But people want to, I say build a wall, either technologically or physically. We've got to have a wall. A country without borders ceases to be a country. We give Mexico over $400 million a year in aid, and yet we get dumped on. And that's primarily due to the lobbyists and the legislators, both parties, have sold our country out just to stay in power. When I was in the legislature, I sponsored some legislation dealing with these coyotes, they call them, the people that haul folks in. I followed a rickety old van from the plateau all the way into Nashville in a certain area, and they unloaded these folks. It was unsafe. I mean, I'm a redneck, and I drive old vehicles, and I can spot a rough car or a vehicle, and they were hauling all these people in, and I passed a law of legislation regulating that, and because they were charging these people thousands of dollars, and they could have hopped on a Greyhound. And so I said, and then when we did that, though, we received letters from our party, the Republican Party, said, go easy on the immigration issue. These are Hispanic folks. We're going to pick them up politically in the future on the pro-life issue. My friends in the Democratic Party told me that they received similar from their party, but it said, go easy on these folks. We're going to pick them up on the social issue, on the social programs issues.
So
that told me both parties will sell our country out to stay in power.
Hate to hear that. That's going to be an issue that you're definitely going to be tackling
if you
make it to Washington.
It's an issue we got to deal with as a country, and I'm sorry. I know we got things to talk about.
That's okay. I'm sorry. We do want to get through some more issues so the voters get to know you ahead of the general election here a little bit more. Health care, real quickly. You're a big advocate for better veteran care as well as better mental health care. The big question that it always boils down to is how do we pay for it?
First of all, we've got billions. I read a report, $40 billion in Medicaid and Medicare fraud in this country that we know of, possibly more. Nobody's addressing that. You address the fraud, you stop the fraud, you enforce the laws, you put teeth in the laws that stops that. That money could go towards those type of things, indigent care, single moms, our veterans. Our veterans ought to be able to take a card and say, hey, I'm a veteran, and go to any doctor or any pharmacist like you and I go to. My daughter, wife, and I, we can walk to Long's drugstore. Veterans, a lot of veterans in our community have to go all the way to Johnson City. That's a disgrace. If I was in charge, I would say put all those congressmen and senators on the dadgum health plan that the veterans are on, and it would fix it overnight. But it doesn't, because we lose 30 veterans a day to suicide. You call a suicide hotline and they're put on hold for 30 minutes. That is a disgrace, and we need to end it.
Is that one of your top issues if you go to Washington?
Yes, ma'am, and that energy independence. Knox County borders Anderson County, which has Oak Ridge National Laboratory, and Y-12 nuclear weapons complex. The money we're spending overseas in over 100 countries with our military now, you couldn't even name them. You maybe could, I couldn't. The countries that our military is in, there's no reason that we're in there except for the price of oil. American fighting men and women should not be polishing the silverware of some potentate or some sheik, cleaning out these temples and things for them. That is not their job. Their job is to uphold the Constitution of the United States. We need to bring those folks home, spend those billions of dollars right here at Oak Ridge National Laboratory and Y-12 Nuclear Weapons Complex and become energy independent.
Tim, we have just about 30 seconds. Real quickly, is there one thing that maybe the voters don't know about you? You're a pretty open book, and
No.
you've been in politics for a long time. Is there something that you want to champion when you go to Washington that maybe you haven't talked about before?
They know me, and they know what I'm after, and they know it's fiscal responsibility and an end of the shenanigans, and stop all the talk and chatter just to stir up memberships, both sides. I'm sick of it. The American public's sick of it. We need to get back to work, and Congress and the Senate need to start acting like a group of adults instead of a bunch of babies just trying to sell memberships to their parties, because that's what they're doing. And when they keep our country divided, and that keeps them in power.
All right, Mayor Burchett, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, everyone, our panel of pundits talking election aftermath, from the congressional primaries to the governor's race to the next races in November. Stay with us. You're watching Tennessee This Week on WATE 6 on your side. All right, everyone, welcome back to Tennessee This Week. I'm Kristen Farley. It is time to hear now from our panel of pundits today. And joining us right now, we have our healthcare analyst, Craig Griffith, and our legal analyst, Greg Isaacs. Gentlemen, good to see both of you.
Glad to be here.
Good to see you, Kristen.
All right, everyone, let's talk about that
district.
district.
It was a long night last night.
It was a
on
very
Tuesday,
long election night. Of course, on Thursday.
On Thursday, right.
This is on Sunday, but let's go ahead and take a look at the District 2 Republican primary. There are the final numbers, everyone. We're talking Tim Burchett, 48% of the vote, to Jimmy Matlock, 36%. We just heard from Tim Burchett. Gentlemen, I want you to chime in on a very tired Tim Burchett was in our studios. He's been very busy. But let's talk a little bit about, were you surprised at the outcome of this race?
No, and I'll plagiarize a comment from one of our usual pundits on this program, George Corda. He always has said that Tim Burchett speaks fluent East Tennessee. And I think that's absolutely correct in this case. I mean, he's able to relate to the average voter in here, in our community, in the 2nd District. So I think he's got a lot of heavy things on his plate, as any representative would, and he's going to have to learn some different facets of those as he moves farther down in the campaign trail. But I think right now, you would have to say he's probably the overwhelming favorite.
Greg, what do you think about the negative campaigning that happened here between Matlock and Burchett? Do you think ultimately that hurt Matlock?
Well, I think it did, because, you know, Tim Burchett has been around. He's been in the state legislature, been the county mayor, and he's always everywhere. I mean, you know Tim, family very involved in the Knoxville community. But, you know, there was maybe a tendency that we were tired of Duncans. We're tired of people that have been career politicians. But Matlock, when it seemed like he may start to get some traction, went negative with a capital N. And I think people that might have been open-minded were really turned off by just the degree of the acrimony and the just visceral imagery that some of the mailers and the things the Matlock camp sent out.
Let's talk about, you know, there's so many people who say the negative ads work, though. And if you look at the results from this past week, it looks like maybe that's not the case. How do you find a balance as a candidate moving forward?
Well, I think you've got to send a message. So I think, you know, that's what Bill Lee did very effectively in the gubernatorial campaign. But you have to have a message that defines and creates your brand for the voters. And I think we're all getting turned off nationally, on the state level and locally with negative campaigns. And then the other thing, you know, if you're going to go negative, you better have a factual basis and it better be accurate. But when you go negative and it seems like it's disingenuous, I think the voters are smarter than those type of politicians think. So I think Matlock had a shot, but that tone and tenor of the campaign backfired very dramatically.
Craig, we just heard Tim Burchett say that veterans health care would be a top priority for him if he were to make it to Washington. Do you think that he would have the power to get something through and to kind of spur real change there?
Well, he'd be one of 435 if he gets elected, so it's hard. But if you focus on things, you know, representatives from the Midwest focus on farm issues, and I think that if Tim makes that his cause celebrate, he can be effective in spurring some changes. And there's a new head of the VA, so I think it's time to come in and maybe we'll take a new look at things. And I personally agree with his position that if you have your discharge card and you're a veteran, you should be able to take that to any doctor or hospital in the United States and get treatment. It shouldn't be limited just to the VA. Of course, the VA strongly opposes that. They want all of that to be there in their silo.
But then creates long trips for so many people here in East Tennessee.
Indeed it does.
Let's take a look at who the competition will be against Tim Burchett come November. Let's look at the Democrats on District 2. Renee Hoyos taking 72% of the vote to 23% for Joshua Williams. Now, we spoke with Hoyos on election night. Take a listen.
Well, next we mount the general election campaign strategy, which doesn't differ much from the primary. We're going to run on the issues. We're going to run an open, transparent operation so that everybody understands who we're about. I think it's going to be a great time.
All right, Craig, you already gave us your prediction. Greg, Hoyos-Burchett matchup. Who comes out on top?
I think Burchett. I think Hoyos, sources tell me from the Burchett camp that she has come out this week, the day after the election, saying that she will not take PAC money. And that's going to be hard, because when you're going to have a race that's high profile like this, there is going to be a lot of national, state, and local money there. And to kind of tie one arm behind your back and say, I'm not taking PAC money, I'm a newcomer, I think creates a bigger uphill battle than she would normally have. But I think with name recognition and the numbers, almost 50% after a hotly contested race with Matlock, you're going to see Burchett.
All right, let's move on to the governor's race, everyone. The Republican primary, Bill Lee, 37%. Randy Boyd taking 24%. Congressman Diane Black coming in third with 23%, followed by 15% for House Speaker Beth Harwell. Craig, surprise numbers here?
Well, yeah, I think that Bill Lee should go out and buy some lottery tickets. I think he's got a lucky streak going here. And I went back and I looked it up, and the first time Bill Lee actually was on the top of any polls was just last July 26th. So in a few days, in a few weeks, he really took his campaign from maybe third place to the front runner. And I think that it's the way that he handled the negative advertising that was coming his way that both Boyd and Black got into and went down into the gutter on a lot of these things. And he stayed above and said, I'm not going to do that. And I think that appealed to a lot of people. Of course, he has a compelling life story, and he touted his faith throughout his campaign, which has attracted to many voters in Tennessee. So I think it's going to be an interesting race between him and Carl Dean.
Greg, what did you think last night as you saw the numbers come in?
It was amazing. Everyone thought Lee was trending up, but this race was really surprising because Randy Boyd, a very charismatic, moderate conservative, Diane Black, a very right-wing conservative. Then all of a sudden, the dynamic changed. Everybody wanted to say, Trump loves me more than he loves you. If you said the other side, you didn't support Trump from day one, they would call each other liars. I mean, virtually mirror image campaign commercials, and it became negative. Now, Lee, on the other hand, he told his story the narrative was very calm, very positive, very well produced, and it really resonated with everyone I spoke with because, it started out, I'm like, how is this businessman from Franklin going to translate statewide? And then when you hear his story, my wife looked at me and she said, he seems like a good guy. And then, that kind of kept emerging. But Craig made a good point. When he first started getting traction in the polls, then people felt like they weren't going to throw their vote away if they voted for the guy that they liked. So Diane Black went from number 1 to number 3. Randy was lost in I Love Trump world. And it's going to be an interesting race with Lee and Dean.
Do you think the candidates did not stay true to who they really are in their campaigning?
Well,
except for Lee, maybe?
Well,
I think they looked at their internal polling. We all know candidates do internal polling. I was getting calls, virtually every night. And I think that the polls showed Randy that he maybe needed to pivot to the right, his internal polling. And I think she was out there doing the catch and release ads and build the wall. It was throwing a lot of red meat out to her supporters. And there was I think, an enthusiasm gap that Randy recognized that he had to make up. And that's why he pivoted to the right and tried to do the same thing that Diane Black was doing.
I think if Randy would have ran the same commercials as Lee and told his story and let the voters see his energy, the amount of philanthropy he and his family have done for East Tennessee. The story of how they built their businesses is as or more compelling than Bill Lee. Bill Lee stayed true to himself, didn't bite in the Trump game, didn't bite for the internal polls, and it resonated with voters.
All right, real quickly, that sets up a matchup, everyone, between Bill Lee and Carl Dean coming in November. They will decide who will be our next governor. So let's talk about this really quickly. We're just about out of time. Who wins? Just a simple prediction.
Well, Trump came out and endorsed Bill Lee today, so Tennessee is still a very red state, so I'll have to go with Bill Lee.
I think Lee is obviously the front runner, but if Dean stays true to this, I am not going negative. I'm going to talk about common sense approach to government, education, health care, jobs. It may resonate back to the days of a McWhorter, Al Gore type campaign, as opposed to build the wall, et cetera, et cetera.
All right, guys, thank you so much. We'll be back in a second. We need to take a quick break, everyone. We'll be right back. All right, everyone, welcome back to Tennessee This Week. We're going over the election results from this past week. We want to go ahead and take a look at another race. Republican Marsha Blackburn and Democrat Phil Bredesen winning their primaries easily. Now they're going to face each other in November, everyone. So let's talk about this. Craig, you said almost a year ago, was it a year ago? Almost a year ago, 8 months ago, that you called Bredesen for this race. Still standing by that?
I think so. I think it's, you know, the polls are showing that it's a tight race. So I think the key to this whole race is that if Bredesen stays a Tennessee Democrat, which translates into being a moderate, if he's pulled to the left on issues like, abortion, gun control, immigration, do away with ICE, things like that, he'll lose overwhelmingly. But I think if he does the same thing that he's done in his pre-primary advertising, be pragmatic, be a problem solver. I'm going to go to Nashville, or going to go to Washington to solve problems and not deal with specific one issues like that. I think he has a very good chance of winning this one.
Greg, I want to hear your thoughts, but I also understand that you might be somehow connected to the candidates.
Yeah, I want to disclose that we are giving a fundraiser at the House in September for Governor Bredesen, so just want to put that out there. And we, Democrats, Republicans also did one for Mr. Burchett.
Yeah, yeah. Full disclosure.
Full disclosure.
Craig is Burchett's neighbor, so we've been talking about that as well. So,
and I'm sorry for that.
That's okay.
Let's talk about this race here. It was really, I don't think, any big surprise that it's coming down to these two. Do you think this is going to get ugly like some of the campaigns we've seen?
It's going to be a race that attracts a significant amount of national attention. Can Trump come in and muscle Marsha Blackburn to the U.S. Senate? Bredesen, on the other hand, is going to stay true to himself. You are not going to hear him say, I'll build a wall. You're not going to hear him say, I love Trump first. So, and Bredesen, when I spoke with him a few months ago and asked him about his commercials, he didn't buy into the PR people that were trying to shop him for his message. Instead, he did it himself. He sat down in his living room, and it was a tremendous spot where he said, if I feel I should agree with President Trump and it's best for Tennesseans, I'll do it. If it's not in the best interest of Tennessee, I won't. What a powerful message, and I think he's going to stay true to that.
Stay true to himself, but does that hurt when it comes to Democrats who say, I don't want to hear anything pertaining to Trump?
Well, I think that with Marsha Blackburn as their alternative, then it does. And it's going to be a nationally prominent race because the balance of the Senate could be at stake in this race.
Well,
so there'll be a lot of money coming into the state on this race. And so it's going to be a battle down to the wire. And if Bredesen stays true to himself, as he says, and stays as what could be considered a Tennessee Democrat, a moderate, I think he has a very good chance.
Greg?
Can he overcome the national money? Because the Koch brothers, et cetera, I've heard are going to bring it in wheelbarrows. So, can Governor Bredesen raise the money? He's someone capable of self-funding. But I think people are tired of negative campaigns. So, but here's really the rub on this race. I think a lot of moderate Republicans supported Governor Bredesen when he was governor. But now it's a tougher question to ask for someone's help, because when you're in the U.S. Senate, then you have a direct impact, 100 people, on Supreme Court nominees, on issues like abortion, issues like immigration. So if you like what he's got to overcome, the same people that liked him that were moderate Republicans as a governor, he needs to make them feel comfortable with him sitting in the world's most powerful club.
Does his record with TennCare come back to bite him at all, do you think, during his campaign?
He ran after he did all the changes to TennCare and won overwhelmingly. But in his first race, though, against Van Hillary for governor, he did not. It was a very close race. It was only a matter of 40,000 votes. So, as I said, I think this will go down to the wire.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your insight today.
Thank you, Kristen.
We appreciate it. All right, everyone, if you'd like to watch the show once again, you can find it on our website. That is WATE.com. Thanks for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your weekend.
The views of guests and panelists of this program are their own and not necessarily those of WATE 6 on your side or Nexstar Broadcasting Incorporated.